Hi everyone, welcome to Last Book Alive. This is my first live session with a guest, and my guest today is Janet Rodriguez. Hi, Janet.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, and Janet and I are talking about This Other Eden. It's kind of flipped, but it's called This Other Eden. It's by Paul Harding. Yeah. Oh, you have a different cover.
I know I
And
do.
yeah, and it was shortlisted for the Booker Prize this year. So before we get into the book, Janet, could you please introduce yourself?
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me too. I love Last Book Alive, so I love your podcasts and I love your vlogs and everything.
Thank you.
And I love the international perspective that you bring. That's what I just fell in love with this whole thing and your desire to highlight books. So I'm Janet Rodriguez. I am a writer, teacher, editor, but most of all, I see myself as a reader.
Mm,
So I live in Northern California, and I love discussions like this about books.
mm.
So in a book called Making an American
Yeah.
Family, A Recipe in 5 Generations, and it came out last year, and it's a story of my family coming to the United States from Mexico. And so this book, This Other Eden, really appealed to me
Mm,
because of its focus on um, our nation's history. I mean,
mm,
our country has a weird
mm.
history with silent racism that kind of hides
Mm.
in the shadows, and I
Janet,
really like to see.
can you share the name of your book again? It kind of got like there was a
Oh, sure.
interruption.
Okay. It's called Making an American Family, A
Okay.
Recipe in 5 Generations. And I think it's backwards here, but you can get it wherever fine books are sold.
So
So,
it's
or
about
you can get it.
it's like Mexican recipes, Mexican American recipes.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's Mexican recipes in it, yes, but it's really about how does an immigrant family come to the United States and how do we become American? That's the big deal. Is at what point
Wow.
does an immigrant family become, when do they lose that, what they call the immigrant sheen?
Mm,
When do they start looking like everybody else around them?
mhm.
So
Okay.
it addresses that, but it's really the story of how we survived. I mean,
Mm,
just near death experiences and starvation and
mm.
war and all that stuff.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So so yeah, so actually that's it's a good segue into this book. I think your discussion about your book, because even in this book, This Other Eden, it is about survival in very extreme conditions. But I want to take it from the beginning. So,
Yeah.
Janet, I'm just gonna give a little overview of the books, just so our
Great.
readers know where we are at before we begin our discussion.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so basically, This Other Eden is it's written by Paul Harding, and so this book is actually based on real events. There was actually an island called Malaga Island, which was off the coast of Maine. And this is back in the 1800s, actually. So it had an interracial community that was living there until 1911, when they were actually evicted by the by the government of Maine. And it was started by an African man called Benjamin Darling. It was started in 1794, and he came from the West Indies, and he may or may not have been enslaved. So I'm getting this information from the Maine Coastal Heritage Society, which is the one that's responsible for maintaining this island. And then by 1880, there were about 27 people living on this island. And it included a mix of people. So it was people, African Americans, there were Indians, there were white people, and then there were people who were mixed race.
Yeah.
And I wanted just, yeah, and I just wanted to read uh, about this really interesting mix of people, which is in the book, and it's actually reflected in real life. Um, this is what it says. And so there the last of the honeys were, fourth, fifth, and sixth generations distillate of Angolan fathers and Scottish grandpas, Irish mothers and Congolese grannies, Cape Verdean uncles and Penobscot aunts, cousins from Dingle, Glasgow, and Montserrat. So yeah, and the reason why this important, why this becomes really important, Malaga Island, is because slavery was only abolished in America, in the United States, in 1865, and after that, the country was deeply segregated, and African Americans, Black people, had to face racism and didn't enjoy the same rights as white people and as their white counterparts, and they were denied very basic human rights. And actually, if you watch the podcast prior to this, which was about Ring Shout, we did talk a lot
Yeah.
about Jim Crow there. So it's actually interesting that both of these books actually talk about racism in America and African American history. So that's why this island sticks out, because it's a colony, it's a community of people from different backgrounds living quite in harmony and without any kind of differences. And the Malaga Island becomes Apple Island, and there are like 4 or 5 different families living there. There's the Honeys, and Esther Honey is the matriarch there, and she's also the historian of the island.
Mhm.
Then there's Zachary Hand to God Proverbs. I love these
I love
names.
that name.
I love these names. He is an interesting character. He carves biblical stories on trees. Also lives in the hollow of a tree where he carves these stories. There are the Larks, and there's intermarriage, so they're actually brother and sister, and they basically have children together. And they are presented as being somewhat like mentally like disabled, but it's almost like they're accepted for who they are. Like there's nobody who's trying to
Right. Yeah.
judge them or
Yeah.
institutionalize them or anything like that in the island. And then there are the McDermott sisters, who have adopted 3 children from this woman who came and basically dumped her children there. And I just wanted to read the section about the children once again, just to understand like how people are just kind of organically taken into the community and accepted. And then we'll start our discussion. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so maybe I got the pages wrong. So yeah, wait, hold on one second. Yeah. The McDermott sisters, Violet and Iris, were the daughters of Ginny Black, Sarah Proverb's sister, Vidalia's daughter, and Terence McDermott, Aaron McDermott's youngest son. Ginny and Terence had both been dark, both Congolese, they claimed, but with the island's usual mingled background of darker and lighter, African and European forebears, the full range of their ancestors' features were expressed in Violet and Iris as if through a prism. Violet had milky skin and tightly curled burnished copper-red hair that flared red beneath the sun and fuller moons, and had her parents' broad nose across which dry dark freckles were speckled. Her mouth was full, like her parents', as well as her lips pale. Her eyes were the color of greening copper. Iris had her parents' acorn-dark skin, but the narrow nose and thin lips of her Irish ancestors persisted in her face, as did their hair, which she inherited straight and black. She had one brown eye the color of loam, and the other winter morning sky blue, it being the watchful eye of their great aunt Sarah Proverbs herself, that came back in an island daughter every now and then to see for herself that her kin were making do and behaving Christianly. So this is actually the reason why I marked this, is because of the diversity. That's what it shows, not. Okay, so that was my little bit, just to let y'all know what the book is about. But Janet, over to you. What your thoughts about the book?
I loved the passages that you read. I'm with you. I think that the characters come alive and you get to see the culture, the island settlement of Apple Island, Malaga Island. And what I appreciated about it were the characters and the way that he writes the characters. Like the thing you mentioned, the tree that Zachary Hand to God Proverbs lives in, and about how he carves these scenes from the Bible into the tree, from little tools that he's used from somebody else. Who did he get them from? I'm forgetting. Benjamin Honey.
Yeah, Benjamin Honey, who was the original.
right. Benjamin Honey had brought to the island. And then it says, like everyone else on Apple Island, Zachary's age was a mystery, or unknown in any case. Not a mystery to himself or any other islanders, because none of them followed any calendar, and keeping track of how many years old somebody was never occurred to them. So you do get a island, kind of a isolated but together isolated feeling,
Mm,
and an
mm,
appreciation of that culture within that community.
mm, mm. Have you been to Malaga Island, Janet?
I didn't even know it existed. And when I started reading this, and it begins with that foreword, the foreword that, well, it's not even a foreword, it's just a little blurb about in how it was a mixed race fishing community from the mid 1800s to 1912, when the state of Maine evicted 47 residents from their homes and exhumed and relocated their buried dead. 8 islanders were committed to the Maine School for the Feeble-Minded, and they thought it would be best if they just burned all of the
Yeah,
shacks that
yeah.
the people lived in. And then it says in 2010, the Maine legislature passed a resolution expressing its profound regret.
Mm,
So this is fairly recent. It was 13 years ago, 2010. It took that long for Maine to apologize to
yeah,
the ancestors of these people that they evicted from their home.
yeah, yeah. I
I had
actually,
no idea this
mm,
existed. Yeah.
yeah, I actually was just searching online, and apparently now the descendants of these people of the Malaga Island Islanders, their
Mm.
descendants actually now come to Malaga Island every year. Yeah, they come together. Um, so
That's wonderful.
that's
That's good
really
to hear.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just the whole thing about this happened in our country. I mean, the whole thing about um, them being evicted from their lands in 1912.
Mm,
That it's almost as if they're saying, "Oh, you know what? It's just trash." I mean, you have little shacks that you live in. You know, one guy lives in a tree or whatever. You know, that we're just going to burn it all down, and then you come and live on the mainland. And
mm,
immediately they commit some of the kids into a
yeah,
school for the
yeah,
feeble-minded. They have literally
yeah.
decided that they're not right in the head.
They're
You know,
right.
that there's some kind of retardation going on.
Mm,
So it's very harsh to look at
yeah,
this history.
yeah. Yeah, actually, it's really interesting again because I did this other previous podcast with my friend Slammer, and we were talking about the time period that was like around 1915. So
Mm,
it's just 3 years post, and then the film came out, Birth of a Nation, and
yeah,
how that basically revived the KKK. So this is not, it's just a 3 year difference, and kind of I feel like now I'm looking at American history, but like it does in continuity, like it's a continuation. And it's interesting that how history moved back and forth because Slammer was talking about the Reconstruction period post-slavery when
right,
there was a chance for African Americans to build community wealth, and I feel like this is an example of that. This kind of this island, Apple Island or Malaga Island, existing, and
yeah,
an interracial community thriving there, and it having been started by an African American man, you know,
right.
and then it being dismantled, So I feel like it's like we kind of take 2 steps forward and then maybe 3 steps back or something. And it's not just the U.S. I feel like this history is, if we just look at other countries, I mean, you know, the attack on minorities is something that is, I don't know, part of state building in many ways, nation building, unfortunately. Um, but I wanted to ask
You know, I
you,
think, oh, sorry, I just wanted to build on what you were saying, is
yeah,
that even with the in between the lines written here, is the hardest thing, I think, for people to accept is that the people were content with their living situation. They were content living and mixing race. You know, that thing that got to them because it took a while for us to say, I mean, with loving, U.S. in loving, that mixed race marriages were okay, that they were permitted, you know, that we could recognize them as real. And it sure as heck was a lot longer than, I mean, it took a lot longer than 1913. So it's hard to look at family history this way. It's hard to see my nation's history having such a hard time accepting that these people on the island, they didn't really want intervention. And, you know, I know this is fiction, but you mentioned Iris and Violet as sisters and how they were very thoughtful women, almost like guardian angels, so to speak. I mean, they would look over people and, you know, they chose not to marry, so they didn't have children of their own, but they would look at people and then measure them. You know, should we trust this person into the community? Should we value them? You know, here comes this other person. I'm not so sure that I'm going to trust him. And they would,
I'm gonna
yeah,
slap him.
right, yeah. So they would be like what we saw. We used their eyes to see things. And I thought that was incredibly good writing.
So who are your, like, we mentioned, we're talking about different people. Two questions for you. Favorite part in the book, something that really touched you, and maybe a favorite character. But it doesn't have to be. These are just like kind of things I'm curious about, like what your reading was of the book. So what was some of the, I mean, there are so many parts that are touching actually, but what was a part that you were just like, wow, or
Well,
something that's,
I mean, we just mentioned Iris and Violet. I loved them.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I think that it's very hard not to love Esther because she is such a beautiful, round character. And we begin with the flood story. This book begins of when the island was flooded. And it's almost, I want to say it's almost biblical, the whole story of the flood in this oral tradition that she passes on to the next generation. She seemed almost angelic to me in the story. And the way that she continued in the traditions of her people, and at the same time recognized that it was okay to release Ethan to the mainland and actually prepared him to go to the mainland, and which was, you know, it was the beginning of the end. And
Yeah.
I think that my favorite part about the book, other than the language, which is stunning,
Yeah.
it's just the most beautiful sentences I've read.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but I think the building of that island and getting us on that island as readers, that was brilliant. I mean, the first section of the book is the longest section, I think. And that's basically building the community in our eyes and in our hearts. So that by the time we introduce the idea of eugenics, then we already know that this is a culture worth preserving. And we have to
Wow,
buy
that's
in,
well
you know?
put.
Yeah. So I loved that.
Yeah. Um, I think there's a lot of love in this book.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of love, like what you were saying, like how like the first, so the book is divided into three parts. I don't want to give away too much, although I mean
Right.
I
Yeah.
think people will know when we're talking what happens. But the first part of the book, when as you said that Harding is building up this community, we see how people care for each other, even the McDermott sisters that who you spoke
Yeah.
about. You know, so there's a lot of love between the characters, and also there's a lot of love that I feel like Harding has for his characters. He portrays them in a very humane kind of way, and I actually wanted to read one section, a paragraph actually. No, not a paragraph, actually just one line. But there's so many, as you said, there's so many beautiful lines. Like even in this book, like I just recently reviewed Ocean Vuong's book. What was it? On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. And
Yeah, I
even in
saw
that
that.
book, there were these sentences that just kind of like, and then I feel like in this book also, there's sentences that really kind of very beautifully articulated. But anyway, and it really shows the love. So this is one sentence. Okay. Actually, I want to read this little paragraph. So it's Iha. Iha is Esther Honey's um, son. Esther Honey's son. So Esther Honey, we just talked about, she's a matriarch. He's her son. Iha sits on the stool, silent, eyes directed to the tabletop, but seeing what who can tell, and he suddenly seems so dense of matter to Matthew Diamond as to be monumental.
Mm-hmm.
Matthew Diamond is the missionary who brings the state into the island. The stool beneath him about to explode as if a block of marble has just been lowered onto it, and it only remains to be seen along which exact grains in the wood it will explode and collapse beneath the monolithic man. The sharp sun cuts behind Iha across the raw planked floor and lights the back of his head and makes a bright halo of his braided and corkscrewed silver hair, decorated with trinkets his daughters weave into it. So the reason why I like this particular paragraph is because, here's this, monolithic man. So there's this, kind of physicality of him, is that he is, like this very well-built man. And then, he has these trinkets weaved into his hair. So there's this tenderness also.
Yeah.
So that's why. And yeah, I mean, I think another... also, what I like was, like, there's no idea of work on this island. Like, people work to live. Like, that's it. Like, they do
Right.
as much as possible to survive, and then they do other things. Like, they're preoccupied with
Yeah.
carving, carving scriptures, or just sitting and smoking and reflecting on life and things like that. I was tempted to take up smoking because of this again.
A long pipe.
But
Yeah.
I knew that wouldn't have the same tobacco. Like, they smoke like mugwort, or I don't know what that is. Do you know what that is?
It's like an herb. Mugwort is like a weed. So I think it would be the same as like smoking lavender, or I don't know much about it, but I just love how Esther's delousing. There's this one part where she's delousing her grandson Matthew, who's going to go over to the mainland, and someone notices and says, "Hey, better give me your pipe," because she's doing it with kerosene. In other words,
Yeah.
Yeah,
she's gonna set him on fire.
Yes, she's afraid. All of a sudden, maybe there's got to be some kind of thought here. Yeah. So, and that's funny because she takes one good long puff before she hands it over. But I loved that. I did love how there was we do this to sustain ourselves. And even then, there's a part where, we're talking about Zachary hand to God, Proverbs, how he's carving in his tree, bark, and he's living in there. And this is his. No one is gonna see this. The way that he carves hands, and the way that says it about all of these ways that he loved carving, sculpting robes, vegetation, faces, and most of all, hands, through which he took special joy in expressing despair, support, betrayal, supplication, forgiveness, healing, benediction, blessing, revenge, comfort, murder, hands raised high, hanging limp, clenched, slack, palms out, extended, turned in, retracted, bathing feet, supporting elbows, wiping tears, tightening nooses, drawing swords, jabbing vinegar sops, thrusting spears, caressing sleeping faces. He goes to such trouble to make sure that this is perfect.
Yeah.
And who will see it?
Yeah.
He doesn't care. It's
He
for
doesn't.
him. His art is for him.
Mm.
And you love him. You don't need to know too much more about him.
Mm.
But at one point, I think someone comes and offers him some mushrooms, and
Mm.
I'm forgetting where that was. I should have written it down. But I just think of how they look after one another,
Yeah.
and then they, there's care for one another. If someone's walking by, there's going to be a conversation. So
Mm.
there's an island culture here that is not the normal tropical island culture that we're used to reading of islands.
Mm.
This is a very sparse community that
Mm.
are living in a settlement together,
Yeah.
and they're all used to the life that they have.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then, by the way, here comes Matthew. Is it Matthew?
Exactly.
Yeah. So the
Yeah.
missionary comes in, and he really wants to do the will of God. It says this, he's really excited about coming to the island. He
Yeah.
was ready to do everything. But there's just one thing that he knows, and that is that he is better than the Negro population or
Mm.
something like that.
Mm.
He has such embedded racism in his
Yeah.
heart.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
still doesn't get it.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I think so there are several things that I like about this book. There's some things that I thought that it was a beautiful writing. Like characters were so well
Mhm.
written, but I also felt like it didn't go far enough.
Okay.
Yeah, and there were some questions that I thought that there were too many things that were left unresolved. Like, what happened to Ethan? What happened to Ethan, honey? He just like once he runs away from his place, his internship, I think it was, where he was like learning to paint in the mainland, and then he just disappears. I don't want to give away too much of what happens, but
Yeah.
Ethan Honey is Esther Honey's grandson, very talented painter. Goes to the mainland, is the only one to be selected to go, and then he just disappears. So I felt like that what happened, like that should have been something that he could have discussed or explored. What happens to Zachary? When the island is getting burned, he confronts the people who are doing it, and then then he goes into the water, and then we don't know what happens to him. Where do the
Mm.
honeys go once they leave the island? What happens to them? We don't know. What about the McDermott sisters? Again, we have a glance of them on the water, and then they're gone. So I feel like Harding really followed this close to the true story, which this is what happened, that they were expelled.
Yeah.
Uh, I just I felt the first part of this book was the strongest part, where he builds up the island life,
Yeah.
but I felt like it didn't balance out with the second and third part. Like I felt like, and even Esther, like she's like my favorite character, but I would have really wanted more, uh, by way of, I don't know, like more history, maybe even. I read somewhere in an interview that he gave that he didn't really, like he let his imagination basically take over. It didn't really, which is fair. But then even in his imagination, like I would have wanted a little bit more on the second half. Not just the fact that this is a beautiful island, beautiful people, and then it's destroyed. Like, uh, at least one of these characters should have had a more detailed kind of ending rather than just disappearing. I felt that was a little too convenient. I don't know. What do you agree?
Yeah.
Do you not agree?
Well,
What do you?
first of all, I think it's good to remind the listeners or to your viewers that this book is 221 pages. It is a small book, and I think I'm wondering, because I wanted to ask you, but I didn't want to interrupt you. Do you think that he did this on purpose? That Harding wrote it like this on purpose? That there was so many unfinished ends that everyone just they disperse and then they're gone, and that's it for us, and it was almost like I wanted to go back and read the book again just to
Mm,
make sure that they were okay. But it would be in the beginning of our story. And that's
mm,
what's hard. It's almost like we don't care what happened to them. They're off the island. And we
Mm-hmm.
wanted to cleanse that island, and now it's done.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that you mentioned Zachary at the end, where it said that he did confront them or ask them, whatever, and that he's kind,
Mm-hmm.
but he eventually gives up talking to them, and the way that he says it before heading to the water, that's all we know. We don't know, even as a boat, before heading to
Mm-hmm.
the water, because is he about to go swim out to his death, thinking that if there's no island, there's no life for him? We don't know, and it's left to us. And in a way, that's what happened to them. They were
Mm-hmm.
just given nothing. We're going to disrupt your life, and here's what you get. You get nothing. You don't even
Yeah.
get an ending. Your history is no longer written. It's gone. You're just a number. You're counted, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, I see that, but I also feel like maybe with Ethan, I would have wanted more. Like
I
it felt
agree. With
unfinished.
Ethan, I wanted more. Yeah.
Yeah,
With
like
Ethan, yes. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, how did he? I don't know. I don't know. I'm not the writer, so I can't say like, oh, I would have done this. But like, as a reader, I wanted more. A little bit more from him, and I would have loved actually more stories from Esther. Honestly, like that one story that the book started with, I was like, I want more. Because
Yeah.
it
Well,
really it mixed mythology with the real history of the island, and yeah, it was fantastic. So.
I think
Uh,
that with Iris and Violet, I kind of knew they were going to be okay. I mean, kind of, I mean, I don't know, but what about you? I mean, did you think anybody after this was going to be okay?
I thought that Esther and the Honeys I was hoping they would be okay.
Okay.
Um, but I was, yeah, that sense of like, that sense of like completion was not there, I guess. I don't know for me as a reader, but yeah, I don't know. It's interesting that you bring up the McDermott sisters. Can you talk a little? I mean, I know you already spoke about why you like them, but can you speak a little bit more about them? Like what? Because for me, like they were not the characters that stuck out for me. So I'm interested to know your perspective.
Well, I agree with you about Esther, is that I think if he would have written just a book about Esther, there would not be enough. This woman was so developed in my head that her stories keep going. She's very rounded and beautifully executed. But as far as I was concerned, I saw the island through the lens of the McDermott sisters because they spoke with each other. They would talk about each other. They would talk about other people on the island. They would talk about how things would be done. And they actually would go to the mainland regularly, and they would bring back supplies. Things like, let me just, sorry.
They did laundry also for people, right?
Yeah, yes. So they understood there's a connection to the mainland and there's a life there, but this is our choice here, the island. This is our life. We're here on the island and this is us. And at one point, there is a discussion about accepting an outsider. And one of them says to the other, I really think that we should accept, and you had said this at the beginning, that we should accept everyone because it's except, she says, if we ever have a question, it's usually about men. And even then, the white man is the one that we can't really trust or accept. And I thought, ooh, we're getting nitty gritty here. This is stuff that's said in the house behind closed doors, but this is the feeling of the island. Even later, it says that Esther, she neither liked nor trusted Matthew. they're not easy. And if you look at the Maine culture, I mean, I've not lived in Maine, but Maine has a Yankee pride. I live here. This is my state. Stay the hell out of it if you have that's going to be elbowing in on my freedom. And that's their nature, is that the islanders, this is their life. And just leave us alone and we'll be fine. And of course, that sad part is that that was not done. So in my opinion, that's why I love the McDermott sisters. They would talk and I would hear what they said and I'd be thinking, kind of talking for everybody else. I could see they were thinking and rationalizing what was going on and, just I liked that.
One question that occurred to me, and I don't know if there's actually an answer for this, but I saw that Paul Harding himself is white. He's Caucasian, and then
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
he is, right. I mean, I can't see from, but like I'm assuming he is. What do you think about, like, I'm wondering if this book was written by an African American, what do you I'm wondering how it would be written. What would be the major differences? I mean, it's just a question I'm putting out there. It's actually a thought, because it's interesting to me also that they are presented. I mean, it's beautiful, but it's also like they're kind of put on a pedestal. Like, it's like almost like a fairy tale life. Like, there's starvation,
Yes.
but everybody's so nice. Do you know what I mean? Like, almost everybody's too
Yeah.
nice, and it's beautiful. I mean, I completely bought into it, but it's almost too black and white for me. Like, in the sense, there are the islanders who are perfect, and then there are the outside people who are like, evil.
Yeah.
I think the only ambiguous character is Matthew Diamond, who has like a lot of like internal conflict. But other than him, there's no other character who I remember would have internal conflict. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that you do get to see the underbelly from time to time of because no culture, and even the title there is This Other Eden. And Eden, you do get the connotation that everything is perfect, but it's not. And in fact, Eden falls, all Edens fall. And there's some kind of betrayal that happens. There's some outsider that comes in to steal what is good. And at the same time, you see that it's not stolen, it's freely given. You get to see that the people in this island community, they're very flawed. And here's, for instance, Esther's father is a man that
Yeah,
taught
that's
her
true.
Shakespeare,
Yeah,
and he has made sure she can read.
that's
And
yeah,
yet he has been abusive,
yeah,
and so you get to see that they're very clear that there's some real shit going down in this island. Sorry for my language,
yeah.
but
No, it's fine.
there's
It's only me.
uh
Yeah,
yeah, well, there's some stuff that's not so good,
yeah, that's
that's going down. And yeah, and even the way that they are exclusive, they even recognize that this is not going to last forever, that it can't sustain itself forever. And it's sad, but for while it lasts, and we begin with the whole apple, and your book has an apple on the cover. I love how that's done, because
I'm so glad you went to the cover. Yeah,
yeah, that's
it's
what
up.
brought down Eden, is this apple you're not supposed to eat.
Yeah,
What is the forbidden fruit that they take in that causes Eden to fall?
yeah,
And I think that's a really interesting question.
yeah. So, anything else you'd like to add, Janet? I don't have any, but do you have any
Yeah,
last
This
comments?
this What do you think? I mean, because it's shortlisted for the Booker now. What do you think? Does it belong on this shortlist, in your
Oh God,
opinion? I'm
I have
listening to everything
no
you
idea.
say, so I would love to hear what you think.
So I think I'll have a better idea of uh, I will have a better idea of an answer to that question once I read all the books on the short list. This is the first one that we're discussing. I've read Western Lane, which I'm talking about with my cousin on Sunday. So I'm just going down the list, and so then
Excellent.
I think I'll have a better idea. But I don't know if I can say anything because I have nothing published. So
I think,
I don't know if I
oh,
can say anything, but
I love I love this show because you
thank
have
you.
such balanced opinions. This book has also been nominated for our National Book Award in the United States.
Wow.
So I think if it does not win the Booker, it'll probably win our National Book Award because it really does. I think
Mm,
it does so much in one book, and
mm,
it's flipping 220 pages.
mm,
All I can think of is, how in the heck did he do this? I haven't
mm.
read anything else he's written. Have you?
No, I haven't, but apparently he won the Pulitzer
Yeah,
for
for
his first book,
Tinkers.
I think.
Yeah,
Tinker, yeah.
yeah.
Uh, so yeah, but I have not read any of his other books. So our national, it's our National Book Award or just the national award?
The National Book Award in the U.S. and then the Booker's in England, right? I mean,
Yeah,
the Booker is first, so we have the Booker Prize, and usually there's I always think that the Booker is more internationally focused.
yeah, yeah.
So there's better selection of international fiction
Mm,
on the Booker list. But the National Book Award, I was very surprised to see this on here and happy.
mm,
So, and especially now that I've read it, it's just
mm.
stunning. I love it. So,
Oh, okay. Well, Janet, I'm gonna just thank you so much
thank
for joining
you.
me in this. Really wonderful to get your perspective, your views on this, and yeah, it's always great to have a guest because and you're from the US, so it's always good to have that different perspective, like coming from the place where this book was written. And thank you for such a thoughtful and detailed reading of the book.
And
I really
thank
appreciated
you.
your
Thank you for
views.
your whole, this is wonderful. Just to be here and to meet you in person.
Thank,
So I've been following you for a long time, so I was
wow,
really happy
thank
to
you.
find you after you left, like so many people were leaving X. So I
Yeah. Oh,
was happy
oh,
to
you
find
follow
you
me
here.
on Twitter,
Yeah.
and I think I followed you too.
Yeah, I think
Oh,
so. But I was very grateful that you gave me your address on Instagram, because Instagram's kind of like this huge thing, and hopefully we can find each other there.
yeah.
So, but thank you so much
Thanks.
for doing this, and I'll tune in Sunday with your next one.
Yeah,
So,
I think it's gonna be 9:30. I don't know if we're gonna go live. I will definitely try. I think it's a better format. It just happens really
see
quickly.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'll message you, yeah, on
Okay,
Insta.
perfect.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Janet.
Okay,
Bye.
take care. Bye bye.
Bye.